Good evening. Welcome to a very interesting episode about homeschooling v state schooling. Now, over the last perhaps 15 or 20 years, more children, surprisingly, have chosen, or rather, the parents have chosen to homeschool their children. What's ironic is it's the more wealthier, middle class children that are homeschooling their kids. And still, unfortunately, to date, it's the poorer children from poorer demographics, particularly in inner cities, that are sending their children to school. I have with me here Himaya. Thank you very much for joining me. Thank you, Himaya. Now, she runs a consultancy service, if I may, just Muslim Alternative Education Advocacy. So she runs a consultancy service which helps parents decide whether homeschooling is for them. And what brought it to our attention is I myself went to state school and I can see the benefits and sometimes the drawbacks and the exposure that we get to state schools. What's more nefarious nowadays is the curriculum. And I think a lot of parents, young parents or people that are thinking of having children, they are contending whether they should send their kids to school in contrast to homeschooling, particularly because of the curriculum. So Sister Himaya has come on to speak about homeschooling. She has actually, in fact, had 5 of her children all the way up till college homeschooled. So she has 2 of her children that have been homeschooled all the way up to college, and she's currently got 3 children that are in primary and secondary school, but the equivalent to in homeschooling. Just before we start, I'd like to thank my main sponsor, Amiga Partners. If you haven't got any educational credentials but still would want a degree in various topics and subjects in credible universities, please look at the link below and sign up. They will assist you through into university to do your preferred course without any education. So if you have no qualifications but want to get educated, please look at the link below and sign up, and they'll assist you through admit you into university. Assalamu alaikum, sister. Thank you very much for coming on. I think you're very brave to come on to talk about this matter. The floor is yours. Tell me about homeschooling, because up until now, most people, parents or young adults that inshallah will plan to have children in the future, do not know about homeschooling. Automatically, it's as soon as we have children, they get to 2, 3, send them to private nursery, and then state school, and so on and so forth.
Well, actually, what people don't actually realise is that the law states that education is the responsibility of the parent. So by that understanding, homeschooling is actually the default, and it's school. School is the choice that people make to put for their children. I don't think enough people know this. So because when you actually go on to deregister your child from school, the law that you use is the one that states that the responsibility of education lies with the parents.
Up until what age?
It's a compulsory age, so it's from the age of 5 to 16 in the UK. So nursery age is not considered compulsory.
So parents, through their own volition, can decide whether they send their kids to school.
Yeah, it's a choice. It's an actual choice.
It's a choice.
Yeah.
And obviously the thing that's a concern in a lot of people's minds, whether they have parents or not, is some of the things that are being pushed through or shoved down our throat, particularly with the curriculum. Some of the stuff that are hugely controversial and very upsetting to a lot of people, particularly from our background, Muslims. Some of the things that are being taught in school we don't want our children to be taught. Talk to me about that. Do we have a say in what state schools teach our children?
I mean, I'm not a fan of state schools. Anyone who speaks to me, I don't think they're fit for purpose.
Sure.
I do feel the system is outdated. I do feel it needs relooking at completely, a complete overhaul. And when it comes to homeschooling, we're not obliged to teach the national curriculum. So it is the path that most homeschoolers go through, but it's not an obligation. We're not required to actually teach the national curriculum.
What about core subjects such as maths and English? And do you have to follow what a state school teaches?
No. So the education that you give your child needs to be suitable and efficient.
Okay.
And there is an element of progress required. So, and how you do that is up to you. So maths and English is obviously a given, but it doesn't have to be the maths and English in the way that we teach it at school, that is taught at school. It can be done in many ways. For example, when the child is young, it can be done, for example, when we bake. You can do portioning, dividing, fractioning, these kind of things. So there's many different ways of teaching. Not just teaching, learning. And, the people go do world schooling, they travel the world and they will learn all kinds of things that way. So there's not one rule for all, which is in contrast to the school system. You
So-
see where it is one rule for all.
Okay, so what I've absorbed from what you've told me is, yes, you need to teach them certain elements of maths, English, and science, but it's entirely up to the parent and how they teach and what material they teach.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we would expect. Like, I've got a son with special needs, so he's in year 9. His age is year 9, but his mental ability is a year 4 child.
Okay.
Between year 4 and 5, so there's no point in me teaching him trigonometry.
Okay.
And all that kind of stuff, and algebra, and obviously he's visually impaired, so he can't see things like angles.
Okay.
So I would facilitate that in other ways, perhaps not stress on it so much as it would be stressed in school. So you can do it in a way that suits your child, and not every child is the same. So if one child is advanced, if there is a child, for example, in year 3, year 4, but they're working at year 6 level, schools wouldn't necessarily allow them to skip in that. And I've experienced that as well. My daughter was actually, one of my daughters, she was in Islamic nursery for a very short period of time. And she became quite disruptive because she was just getting bored. The work was too easy for her. So I requested that maybe she be moved a year up. They said, we can't do it. Legally, we can't do that.
I see. And just back to my initial question. So if parents ordinarily are sending their children to state school and there's things in the curriculum they don't want the school to teach their children, do they have a say in that?
At home?
In school?
As homeschool? No. Obviously, national curriculum is national curriculum.
So whatever's embedded in the national curriculum, it has to be taught.
And Islamic schools aren't exempt from that either.
Sure.
They can do it in their own way, or maybe a more subtle way, but it still needs to be taught.
So with regards to homeschooling, I think there is an increase of homeschooling now. A lot of parents are taking that conscious choice to go and homeschool because they think state schooling is a car crash. Talk to me about the obvious. Someone that's a layman that doesn't. I don't have children, so I wouldn't know. But the first thing that comes to my mind is, I can see the benefits of homeschooling because they get concerted attention, and it's your children, so you're going to give them all the resources and all the effort it takes for them to advance. What about the socialization?
So this is the ominous question that everyone asks. It's the first person's, every parent's worry is socialization. And actually, if you look at reality, we don't see, as human beings, as people, we don't see the same people day in, day out, 5 days a week, 30 weeks in a year. That's not reality. And we don't see people of the same ages. That's not reality. So to say that the only way children can socialise is in school is wrong, because that's not reality. My children, not just my children, I know lots and lots of homeschoolers, our children mix with people of all ages. And that is reality, speaking to people of different ages, different cultures, different backgrounds. I mean, we have not just my children, as I said, other children as well. We have, like where we live, my kids are used to helping old ladies across the street. And they start crying because they're like, our own kids don't do this. Our own relatives don't do this. They're not Muslim. So we've read, and I remember once, a few years ago, many years ago actually, we went to buy some material at the local shop, actually in Watney Market. I went to buy some fabric, and my daughter, she was talking to the shop man, and he goes, she was only about 7 at the time. He goes, nobody talks to me like this anymore. She was only 7, and it's not just, and I feel that, the children, they can be themselves, and they come out of their shell rather than, being constantly in one room where they're told to constantly just be quiet. And one of the first things they're told, when the children start talking in class is, be quiet, you're not here to socialise. So if school is a setting for socialisation, why then are they told, you're not here to socialise? It doesn't make sense.
One of the things I'd like to latch on to, you said that the homeschooling community. Just talk to me about the homeschooling community and what there is to offer for your children and anyone else's children.
So I think when people think homeschooling, they think, we're in our houses 24/7.
Yeah.
Our kids don't leave the house. They only see us. We teach them.
Yeah.
It's not how it works. There's a lot. I mean, homeschooling has become huge. I mean, when I started 20 years ago, there was a small community. Now here where we are, it's massive. There's so much going on here. There's been annual homeschooling fairs where we meet and we kind of speak, and we invite people to homeschool, just demonstrate what it's about. There's lots of ways to homeschool. So you can teach it yourself. You can outsource with a tutor. You can join clubs. There's lots and lots going on. I mean, I've never actually taught my children most things. I taught them how to read, and obviously assisted them with basic counting. And other than my son with Sen, they've done it all themselves. And that is true for most homeschoolers. It's kind of an independent way of learning, which is why that when people start to want to deregister from school and begin to homeschool their children, the first piece of advice is take some time. Take some time out to get to know your child. And again, once again, because the child's been away from you for so long, and learn what your children likes and dislikes, and then work with your child rather than against it. Because a lot of the issues that arise in school are because the child is not being listened to, or the child may be left behind. So help your child at home, and then you don't need to do everything yourself. Outsource it. Here we have lots of clubs, there's scouts, there's all sorts of things going on. There's lots and lots of things, and it's not that we stick to our own and we just stick to homeschoolers. We don't. It's not how it works. You go to like after school clubs, whatever's available in the community. So we take advantage of everything.
So you fill the social element with these after school clubs.
It's not just after school. So some of it is during the day, and it can be like my children, for example. They will do taekwondo, which is not exclusively for homeschoolers.
Right.
They do swimming after school at the local leisure centre. Again, not exclusive to homeschoolers. Although there is a homeschooling swimming sessions as well, which I chose not to put my children in. And there's Muslim children and non-Muslim children.
But generally, homeschoolers they have access to these services.
Absolutely, everything.
Is it expensive to homeschool?
So it depends really, because again, it depends where you are. Because where there's a large homeschooling community, the costs are kept minimal by it's called things called co-ops. So we do things like science, STEM projects, and so it might be, for example, a 6-week term, which is the cost divided for us maybe about just £30. Like £5 a week per child, sibling discount. So it can be kept to a minimum. Some things that are offered are free as well, so we take advantage of that as well.
Who do you, again? Unfortunately, we live in a dual economy where both mother and father, husband and wife they're obliged to work just to make ends meet. So, in that instance, obviously, because the mother or father, in an instance, have to go to work, they can't teach their children at home. So automatically, they have to send their kids to state school.
Well, not always, because obviously work doesn't necessarily always need to be out. I know many mums who husbands work out, mums work at home, work from home, maybe teaching, or they run their own business, or there could be anything. So and I know actually I've spoken to I speak to a lot of people, so I see how their dynamics are. There's other sisters who they may work 2 or 3 days a week. Kids are left with the grandparents, and they do online schooling. For example, for those 2 or 3 days where mum perhaps can't be there for the 2 or 3 days. So this is an option as well of online schooling, or there's plenty of options out there.
What's the biggest drawback? What you started 20 years ago. What would you say? Let's fast forward to the last 5 years. What would you say would be the biggest drawback to not, and you're speaking to parents out there now, new parents, for instance, to not send your children to state school? In your opinion,
the biggest drawback of not sending time. Time is obviously not a homeschooling parent's best friend, because it requires a lot of sacrifice, and not every parent's willing to do that. I speak to parents and they're like, "Oh, I can't deal with my kids in my face all the time." I find that quite offensive, to be honest. For me, it's like, you had children. If you had children to dump them in school, then what was the point? I know it's quite controversial, and I have people have jumped down my throat with regards to that. But if you have an option of, everyone's setup is different. But if you have an option, why wouldn't you homeschool? You see, time isn't your best friend when it comes to homeschooling. You have to make that time. But for me, it's like, they're my children. Why, how much time do I need away from I don't need 30 hours a week away from my children. It doesn't make sense to me.
That's true. In terms of curriculum, so in state school, particularly primary and secondary school, during a normal workday, school day rather, it's from 9 o'clock or 8:30 to 3:30. Just how you set out the curriculum or the day-to-day syllabus for your child or children, is it strict to that regime?
No, not at all.
So how much, if for instance, from 9:30 to 3:30 in school, or 8:30 to 3:30, they learn a certain amount, it's regimented.
Yeah.
Are you saying that you can teach all of that's been taught in school in a condensed amount of time?
All of that or none of it? I mean, for example, my routine has always been, as I said, I've been doing it for a long time, so my focus has always been maths and English, and everything else we did from different means. So with my older girls, it would have been, there were like science clubs that they would go to, so they would get the science there. Geography, we would do projects. We combined it with Islam. So it varies. With my younger children, there's a lot more going on. So there's gardening club, there's other clubs, like Islamic clubs and STEM clubs. There's all kinds of things going on. So I focus primarily on the maths and English, not because it's not facilitated, but I prefer to do it that way because I felt, I mean, at one point my daughter, everything was outsourced because I had a younger one as well, and I've got an older one with the special needs. But then I felt like she's doing way too much and she's not at home anymore. So then I kind of pulled back from it, and then I wanted to be the one to see those achievements. I wanted to be the one to see her progress and see how she's progressing.
So an active parent.
Yeah.
How many hours? So let's use your daughter as an example. When you did, she's past college now. She's older now.
Yeah.
How many hours would you dedicate a day for her particular core schooling?
So the academics, it's quality over quantity.
Okay.
So it was maybe 2-3 hours a day on maths and English, focused, and then everything else would be done in other ways. As I said, it could be done like an online program, or so it was. So education, when you homeschool, education needs to be full time. But we don't see, for example, playing Scrabble. We don't see that as not educational. It is educational because they can learn literacy skills from that. You see, so as I mentioned earlier as well, with things like baking, you have the fractions, the ratio. So it's obviously they're older now, but it's everything becomes learning. Everything when we go out shopping, for example, it's like a treasure hunt. It's remembering, and there's lots and lots of things. So you have to have the bigger picture of what education is.
In your opinion, and again, this may be biased, do you think that homeschooling the child that is being homeschooled in comparison to their counterparts in school are intellectually more advanced because of what they've been given?
In what sense?
So they're homeschooled full time, and you compare that same child that has gone to state school. What would you say? Would you say the child that was homeschooled is far more intellectually superior for their age in comparison?
For me, the way I've seen it is that I prefer to have children as thinkers. I'm a firm believer of raising children, not robots, and I believe that when they're in school, you're not allowed to think anymore. Nowadays, especially, you can't think, you can't express your opinions because things like prevent called on you, or all these kind of things happen. So I don't believe that school is a safe space for children to think. So as far as intellect, maybe they may be academically better, but according to what standards?
To their counterpart that goes to school.
Yeah.
If you were to compare, because you run a consultancy business, let's take, I don't know, a cohort of 50 to 100 children that are homeschooled and compare them to 50 to 100 children that go to state school. So they're equivalent. Are they intellectually more sharper? Are their life skills greater?
For homeschoolers, 100%.
Yeah?
Absolutely.
Just talk to me about that, life skills perhaps. Cause...
I mean, there's lots of things that the homeschool kids can do that perhaps school kids don't have time for example. I feel a lot of the parents that I speak to, they're like, my kids, especially the Muslim ones, I speak to non-Muslim parents as well, but it's, their kids are in school the whole time and they don't have time for any extracurricular clubs because they come home and they go to madrasa and then they're just tired. So where is that space to kind of do things? So intellectually, I think a lot of the homeschoolers are very high achievers at home. I've seen a lot, they've gone off to university. I've heard of some who have gone to, I've read of some actually who've gone to like Oxford and Cambridge.
Wow.
So it's not that you have to be in school to be able to achieve those things.
One thing that I've noticed anyway from state schools these days, unfortunately, particularly the inner city ones with array of different demographics, obviously they have this unified culture now, this urban culture that unfortunately is widespread across the country, but more so in the inner city, poorer children, most of them are probably on free school meals. At the age of 8, 9, 10, perhaps even 11 or 12, they're exposed to vulgarity, sexualizing the opposite sex and gender, and all the other things, the access, the exposure to drug, and the things that perhaps if you had a control over, your children would not be exposed to. So I think that is the biggest risk, that your children, by the time they're 13, 14, 15, because of popular culture, they're exposed to drugs, sexualization, well, not sexualization, but, the sexualization of the opposite sex, and certain other things that they pick up. And particularly one thing I've also noticed, if you take out the sort of public school children that have to pay, their parents pay for them to be in public, that's different. They're from well-off backgrounds. Their mannerisms, the way they speak, the way they articulate themselves, and what they get up to in their spare time, I feel like because they go to a state school, it's hugely influenced and it sort of controls the way they behave. And it's almost in that direction. I haven't, to be fair, there isn't, when children walk past or I see children, I can't distinguish between which one is homeschooled
Yeah.
aside from the uniform. But
Yeah.
one thing I've noticed more common, more often than not, is that children, particularly of teenage years that go to secondary school, they all think the same way. And unfortunately, it's poison that they're being fed. Not particularly through the curriculum, that could be an argument, but more so that the mannerisms that they pick up, they dress a certain way, they talk a certain way, and they think a certain way. And by and large, it's very disrespectful. No parent would want their children to think that way.
Yeah.
So are we sending our children to the proverbial hell because your children are? I've heard of crazy stories like teenagers getting pregnant, teenagers taking drugs, and for me, in order for us to do this episode, primarily that was the focal point. How do we make our children turn into respectable human beings that contribute to society, in contrast to following the popular culture and becoming these sometimes degenerates?
I think, to touch upon what you said before,
Yeah.
I have to disagree with you slightly there, because I have many friends who perhaps for whatever reason can't home educate.
Yeah.
They're Muslims,
Yeah.
and they send their children to state schools,
Yeah.
but they're involved parents. They're very involved in their children's lives. They're the kind of parents who are, any issue that happens, they jump straight at the school. This happened with my child, that happened with my child.
Yeah.
So those children are fine. So I believe that, as a parents, we have that responsibility as parents to be involved in our children's lives. It's not, and I say the homeschooling isn't for everyone. I mean, I wish everyone could do it, but it's not, it's not something that everyone can always, for a number of reasons. But, it does come from the home. You as a parent, we should be nurturing our children. We shouldn't, even if our children are in school, we should be involved wherever they are. It's the same with madrasas as well. Wherever you send your child, we need to know what your child is getting up. You need to know what your child is getting up to. So I don't put the blame on the schools in that regard, in some regard, because what is our role as parents Islamically? It is to raise our children. And the way for me, home education, and for a lot of parents, deen has always been priority. I never prioritized education over my children's deen, ever. And I always say, what is the point of having a neuroscientist in the house if they don't bow their head down to the Lord that created them? What is the point? Absolutely no point in that. So for me, it was never about education. Alhamdulillah, it came with it. I always made dua to make my children successful. And just keep them firm on the deen. That's all that matters. Allah's not going to ask us about the degrees that we've got.
True.
He's not going to ask about any of this. He will ask us, did we worship him? And if they don't know who their Lord is, what is the point of anything? What is the point of all these degrees?
So true. So essentially, what you're saying is, when you homeschool your children, and this goes to all those that have children, you control what it is that you teach them.
I don't like the word control, because it has kind of a negative connotation. It's like I'm kind of, I don't know, probably not controlling it. It's just I kind of prioritize what is more important as such. I wouldn't teach them perhaps certain topics until their mind is ready for it. My older children, they weren't aware of things like the LGBT. They weren't aware of what it was. We never spoke about the story of Lut alayhi salam. I didn't think their minds were ready for it until they turned maybe 13, 14, when they were, a bit more mature and they were able to accept it. Then it was, for me, it was the right age. Some people are like, well, they're too. You're protecting them. It's not about protecting. It's protecting them. It's about protecting their mind and their deen. Don't expose them to these kind of things. And obviously, I've lived here for the last 20 odd years, so it has changed, but in some regard, it hasn't changed that much, because the issues that were there, maybe 20 years ago, they're still there around now. Some of them are still around. Maybe the LGBT issue has come a bit more in your face, but my kids understand. Alhamdulillah. My little ones they're still not fully aware.
Which is why I'd say it's controlled. You control what's being taught, the exposure.
In that regard,
the exposure.
Exposure, yeah.
And the reason why I say state schools have this, it's not that so much that the school is teaching these things, but when you're mixing with different backgrounds, and when you're mixing with different backgrounds, and you've got to realise also a lot of these children that are coming to these schools and you're mixing with are from broken families.
Yeah.
And whatever they're picking up from home, they're rubbing off with your children. If I just draw back to my own experiences when I went to state school, by the time I was a teenager, my thought processes of girls, the glamorization of drugs, and everything else could have been avoided if I was in a setting that was controlled. Now, I'm not saying that could be homeschooled. And I'm saying, yes, there are, you've mentioned that parents that do take an active role in their children's
Yeah.
studies, I think that's still an exception.
Yeah.
Most children, I can't say most children, but I'd say an overwhelming amount are by their parents sent to school and just
Left
leave
there.
leave
That's
them
it.
to it.
That's the
and,
problem.
and going to school, particularly, I think when they're in the sort of 3 to 10, 11, 12, where they're still children, that's fine. It's the moment where they have the ability to think for themselves and they have that degree of autonomy.
Yeah.
And it's what they've been exposed to then.
Yeah.
I mean, it's shocking that you see now there's 12, 13-year-olds being pregnant.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
Yeah.
this only can happen
Yeah.
if you're in state schools.
Yeah.
That's my concern. It's shocking that 14-year-olds are smoking drugs.
Yeah.
I can, not that I bet, but I can, happily say that none of your children take drugs.
Yeah, absolutely.
No,
And the thing is, I wouldn't worry about. I know exactly where my children are. You know, if
That's
my
it.
kids go out, they're saying
Yeah.
they're going shopping or they're going to a
Yeah.
friend's house. I know they're going shopping or a friend's house. I know they're not going to kind of say they're going there, but go somewhere else. But that's because we have that trust. We're very kind of easygoing with that. We don't have that. We don't doubt our children. We've never caused them to, they've never lied to us. We don't have a policy in the home of no lying. And where does that come from? That comes from the deen, our whole household, and household of, obviously most of the homeschoolers that I know, the Muslim ones, obviously, our lives, our ethos is based on Islam. So where Islam doesn't allow us to lie, always tell the truth, not allowed to swear, we kind of actually implement it. Where I think a lot of people necessarily
So
don't.
you only get that. So children that are well spoken or behave in a certain way, I've noticed that if they're going to grammar schools, which not everyone can get into, or they're going to public schools, which you have to find, and they're extraordinary amounts. So you're from a very well-off background. I can notice their mannerisms, and those children, they have a competitive advantage. Like it's quite significant how they're more, let's just say, more tuned in than kids in state schools.
I would disagree with that because I know people whose kids go to grammar school. They can't even string a conversation together.
How did they get into grammar school then?
Obviously, they're from the money or whatever.
No, grammar school, you need to pass a certain test to get
Allah
in.
knows. I mean, however they got in, but when it comes to reality,
Yeah.
you can't even speak to them. They don't speak to you. So, okay, it's a grammar school, it's a posh school, etc. But if you don't have the basics of life, what is the point? That's
True.
all that education. If you can't speak to people, then what's the point of it?
Man, it's soft skills and people skills. And
Yeah.
from what you've told me, I can sort of deduce that children that are homeschooled, their soft skills and their people skills, they not only understand it from a very early age of their life, but it only gets better, right? Because they're developing.
Yeah.
I want to focus on parents now because, like I said, not many parents can't do it because they may have to go out to work if they're not working from home. And also, and this is not something, I understand it, you don't need, some people are naturally lazy.
Yeah.
Some mothers or fathers will not want to teach their children at home because they may be lazy people, and that's that's just who they are.
Yeah.
They have enough on their plate. So what criteria do you need to fill? So there might be parents out there now, they have young babies or children that have aspirations to teach their children themselves as opposed to send them to school. What attributes do they need to have? What qualities do they need to have? And do they need to have any qualifications?
So qualifications, no, for sure,
Yeah.
100%. The rest of it, you need to. Homeschooling requires commitment. That's the first thing. It requires commitment, sabr, and sacrifice. That's what I can say to you. I know like a friend, my colleague who runs a service with me. She's a tutor herself. She teaches herself, and actually one of her children actually doing A levels, and she's 13 or 14.
Wow.
She's very young, yeah.
Okay.
So
Wow.
very young. So she's homeschooled all her children. She was homeschooled herself, and so it requires a lot of commitment. So you think about it, but don't stress over it because Allah knows what. And I get people coming to me when their children are just like 6 months old. I'm like, look, Bismillah, enjoy your child. You don't know where you're going to be in 5 years. You don't know what your situation is going to be like. Cross that bridge when it comes to it. Don't stress too much about it now. Think about it by all means. Just take your child out, but don't push the fact. I mean, people say, how can I teach phonics to my 2-year-old? I'm like, Bismillah, come on. Just let your child 2-year-old play. It's a 2-year-old. And I've got adults and I've got adult children and their lives just flash before your eyes. My one turned 23 end of September. Well, they turned 23 and 21 at the end of September, and I remember them being born like it was yesterday. You know, so it's like just cross every bridge when it comes to it. There's plenty of time to worry about education, and at the moment you may think I want to do it, but you don't know where you're going to be in 5 years' time, which is when it becomes compulsory on you to worry about it. So then just cross that bridge when it comes to it.
But you're clearly an advocate for homeschooling.
Absolutely, yeah.
And what would be your biggest reason not to send, if you were to advise parents, parents that have young children or babies, what would be the maybe one or two reasons why you'd say stay away from state schools? Because I've mentioned some, and what would you say is the biggest ones?
I think firstly for me is, your children are your children. Remind yourself why you had children. And secondly, they're an amana on you, and Allah's going to ask you about that. So if obviously we understand that hidayah is from Allah, guidance is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but we have to have kind of, we decide on things like madrasa for them, etc.
Yep.
But when it comes to, and I always say this, there's parents out there who are concerned about, vaccines and, all these other kind of things. But when it comes to education, why are you not having the same concern? What goes into our body through vaccines, what they're watching on TV? Why are you not concerned about what goes for that many years in your child's life? Think about that as well. Allah's going to ask us about that. If our child, obviously guidance is from Allah, we raise our children as best as we can, and we leave the rest to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So always think about your akhirah as well, not just your akhirah, but your child's akhirah as well.
Thank you very much, sister. Any last comments for homeschooling or anything you think about state schooling?
I can say a lot about state schooling. For me, I just don't think, school is an environment for children to be in. There's a lot of people out there who believe that school has become like prisons, whereas you're locked up all that time. You're told when to go to the toilet. You're told when to speak. Told when to walk. I spoke to a sister last week, and she said that her daughter was getting disciplined because she looked at a teacher, and the teacher said she was giving her a dirty look.
Wow.
Do you understand? It's like, well, what is wrong with that? That's because the teacher thought the daughter was the girl was giving a dirty look. So if you can homeschool. Then my service is there to guide people. Because I've done it for such a long time, I speak from experience, not only as a homeschooler, but as a mother as well. I don't have a lot of the issues that most parents face. A lot of family around me or just people around me, I don't have the issues that they face because I've always had a complete involvement in my children's lives. I know exactly what they're doing. I ask them daily about I'm sure most parents do. I'm not questioning people's ability to parent, but I think give that time, and if it means sacrifice, then sacrifice. I sacrificed 20 years of my life, and I don't regret it one bit. Now it's my time to do things for myself, and it's not at the expense of my children or my family. I can look after my house. My kids are still educated. They're still all happy. They're all clothed. My house is tidy. But I'm doing things for myself now. So I'm at that stage where I can do things for myself. But homeschooling itself comes with a lot of sacrifice. But if we're not going to sacrifice for our children, who are we going to sacrifice for?
That's a very valid point. Lastly, I have one quick question for you. How have your children's mannerisms been, their etiquettes, their conduct throughout their journey of homeschooling?
So actually, I used to threaten them with sending them to school.
Oh, did you?
If they didn't do their work, they would be like, no. I would threaten them to school, and they're like, oh, we're... And then I'm like, then they look at their relatives, and they're like, actually, no, that kid left school home in the morning at 8, came back at 3:30. They don't want to be locked, behind closed doors.
Up. So you see it from an
freedom.
Illusionary freedom in prison. And my concern is just the kids that are going to school, not so much the curriculum that they're being taught, but the mannerisms they pick up.
Absolutely. And the thing is, I think if you expose your child, we need to be, involved parents. We should be able to see that our child's behaviour has changed. So are we just going to be the parent? Okay, your child hasn't said a swear word in their life once, and suddenly they've come back and they're effing and blinding. Are you just going to let them eff and blind? Oh, it's just passing phase. No. You're going to deal with it straight away. So any negative behaviours, as you would if they were going out somewhere to relatives or somewhere, why is it different when it's at school? If they were going to a relative's house or somebody else's house and you saw those negative behaviours from them, you would address that. So why don't you address it when they're at school?
True. You pick up, from my experience in going to school, you pick up all of the swear words and really all the bad habits. And the proof of the pudding is in the eating. So you really understand when they become not young adults, but young teenagers, 16, 17, where they have a bit more freedom. So I think logically, if a parent, very active, conscientious parents were to teach their children from the age up until 16 and they went off to college, I think they would be fine. people
I
that we
think a lot of
accidentally say.
homeschoolers do that. You know, my children, they decided not to go to college purely because of the fitna. We had the open days. They visited. They went to the open days, but they said there's too much fitna here. We don't want to go.
What sort of fitna?
Just it was like, you know, the free mixing, and you know, there was a lot of, you know, just like the attitudes, and they don't like it. They also did some workshops at the weekend while they were still home educated, and a lot of the girls from there were from regular schools, so they were like, these girls, they're meant to be Muslims. It's a Muslim workshop, Islamic workshop, and they're talking about boyfriends.
So can you see these things have been picked up from
so
school?
my girls were like, Mum, why are they talking about boyfriends? You know, they're meant to be Muslim, or they're talking about the latest music, or
It's popular culture.
do you see? So and they don't like that. They don't like that. They're like, you know, my kids are very like, this is haram. They will just say it to people's
That's
faces.
because, can I say it's because you've controlled what they've been exposed to.
Yeah.
And that's the crux of my point.
Yeah, I suppose so. In that regard, I suppose so. But I think it's important because as Muslims, you know, we are supposed to, you know, when we see haram, we are supposed to point it out. We're not supposed to just become part of it. You know, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he never taught us to isolate ourselves or integrate. He says someone always interacted with people. So if you're not going to speak to people, engage with them and explain to them. I mean, it's a form of da'wah as well as say to them, this is haram. We can't do these things. You know, so I think they had that. They had their pockets of culture shocks, and I think those kind of things, you know, because they did used to go to, like I said, these workshops where there were school children there as well, kids who went to school, Islamic school and state schools, children. They were just like, Mum, these kids are talking about, these girls are like same age as us, 14, 15, they're talking about boyfriends. So they were like, we don't want to be amongst that. So when they went for their open days, they're like, this is too much.
Yeah, see, okay, you know. That's what would be my trepidation. I haven't got children or anything, but those people that have children, and I speak to my friends that do have children, that is their worry.
Yeah.
Particularly if they have daughters.
Yeah.
Sending your daughters to state school is, I mean, as a father, someone that's a father rather, you know, they'll be scratching their hair out.
Absolutely. And I think you can, and think about what lies ahead. You know, that you can do things from home. So if you can't actively home educate the way I did, there are online schools that you can do all the curriculum subjects. You know, they'll do the maths and the English and the literature and the 3 sciences.
Are you saying that the parents that, lazy is not the right word, parents that have other things on, they can siphon it off too?
Yeah, you can do online schooling, and then you know, and even when it comes to college level now, you can do like A levels online. Obviously, think about the future, think about what lies ahead as well in that regard as well. Save up, because it's not cheap, because you do have to pay for everything yourself.
Sure.
But we can do things like GCSEs over the years. You can you don't have to do it in year 10 and 11. You can do it year 7, year 8, year 9. It has been done successfully. So it's the world is your oyster. I always say, when you take your mind, when your mind has come out of the box that is in the school, that is the school system, the world is your oyster.
Thank you very much. I think we'll leave it there. If you do want to reach out to Sister Himaya, her details will come up on the screen now. Reach out to her for some advice, some consultancy, whatever it may be you need. If I were to quickly put a spin on it myself, we need to start thinking, some of us that are parents, we need to start thinking like rich parents. What do rich people do with their children? They either put them to public school, which is private school, they pay for those schools, or more often than not now, they're homeschooling, because even they realise we can't send them to state school. State school, not that state schools are bad, a lot of us have been educated through state school, and alhamdulillah, we've achieved in life, alhamdulillah, bismillah. But from my experience, a lot of my bad habits that were picked up from school and from socialising within the school world or axis had to be undone whilst I was an adult, and I had to make a concerted effort or a conscious effort to undo the vulgarity, some of the mindsets that I had regarding to women, girls, drugs, popular culture and all of that. So I haven't got children, but those that do have children that have been through state school, I'm sure it's at the forefront of your mind, or even back of your mind if you've got young babies or children. But, you know, I think as a community and as Muslims, I think we should go into the direction of trying to homeschool our children or do some sort of alternative schooling, because, you know, I haven't got children, but I think it's almost suicide sending your children to school these days, particularly when they get to 12, 13, 14, 15 and they're speaking in a certain way and they're dressing in a certain way and they fully absorb popular culture. You know, particularly if you have daughters. I mean, as a man, I'm a bit biased. You know, if you have sons, they're sons, but daughters, you know, yeah, it's dangerous. And we're Muslims as well, alhamdulillah. Before I go, I thank my main sponsor, Amiga Partners. If you don't have education and want a second chance in education, they will get you into credible universities, do incredible courses. The link is below. Sign up and they'll help you. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye. Assalamu alaikum.